Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Skull.
I'm Zombie Cat.
And this is the Horror Den. Now, today, we're covering something a little different. We're going to be covering a suspense movie called Buried, which was released in
2010.
Yeah, 2010, and it's starring Ryan Reynolds.
The only actor in the movie.
Well, it's not the only actor. It's the only
There's
actor
voice
on screen.
actors.
Yeah,
but...
only actor on screen is Ryan Reynolds. And this movie basically takes place in 2006, kind of right in the middle of the Iraq War, which is a very big portion of the entire movie. This is also one of those kind of movies that it takes place in one set location because Ryan Reynolds' character, Paul, is buried alive.
Yep, from the opening scene. That's pretty much it. You're stuck in a coffin with Ryan Reynolds trying to figure out how he's gonna get out of this coffin, essentially.
And all he has at the beginning at his disposal is his Zippo lighter. He has a flask. He has
A cell phone,
but we don't know that yet. And a couple pins. Mm-hmm. That's all he has that we know of. And basically, he's freaking out. Oh, and he also has a bottle of pills. That's all we know. But he's like freaking out, and the phone rings, and it's his kidnapper. Turns out he works for this company called CRT, and he was a truck driver, a part of convoys going through this part of Baghdad.
Yeah, he wasn't in the military or anything like that. He's just literally a truck driver, and essentially his convoy was ambushed by a bunch of kids who were throwing rocks, and then essentially a shootout started, but he wasn't killed. He was just hit, I believe, because the whole movie's got like blood dripping from his head. And I'm trying to think. He's talking on the phone, and this dude's essentially like, we need $5 million in money and we'll let you go. And does he also want him to record the tape at this point? Not yet. Okay. So he just wants $5 million.
He might have mentioned the video now that I'm thinking about it. Apparently there's like this note down at his feet that he wants him to read. And Ryan Reynolds kind of brushes it off at the first time. Mm-hmm. But he spends like the first probably quarter of the movie trying, because his phone is in either Arabic or Egyptian or some kind of. It's
they
another
said
language.
It was from an Egyptian phone line. Yeah. Like, I can't remember.
But it's in another language that's not English that he does not understand nor read.
And essentially, he's panicking and he starts making phone calls. So he starts trying to call family members, the FBI, like police, everybody, and he's making these calls, and they're essentially just kind of like, what are you talking about? Stay calm, stay calm. And he's just not having it. I mean, obviously he's not having it. He's buried alive, and none of them can understand why he's buried. Like, he's talking to, I can't remember who she was, but
it's like a family friend, or either that or like his wife's sister.
This was like some kind of agent in the U.S.
Oh. You're talking about the lady with the Department of State.
Yeah, he's talking to her, and she's like trying to get him to recap the story. He tells her the story, and essentially he's like, we were ambushed, they didn't kill me, but they buried me with this phone. And she's like, why would they do this and this and this? He's like, I don't know, I'm buried in a freaking box, essentially.
The first person he called 911 basically, and he got this 911 operator from Ohio, and he's like, I'm in Iraq, and it's like, this is the 911 center in Ohio.
Yeah, she's like,
we can put you through to other than this, and it's like, just forget it. He hangs up.
Push you through to the sheriff's department. He's like,
yeah, forget it. And also, it's one of those like old school, like, it's not quite a flip phone. It's almost like It's basically a flip phone.
It's like an old BlackBerry.
Yeah.
I was going to say a BlackBerry, but I never had one, so.
I think
Yeah.
BlackBerry slides, and that one might not have slid, but it's like the same.
Yeah.
It would have been. 2006. That's like.
It kind of looked like one of those old Nokia cell phones.
Yeah, like what kind of phones were out in 2006 if you were alive. Which
Yeah.
everyone probably would be.
Well, not everyone. I mean, obviously,
people,
there's
most
people
people.
born every day, DMac.
Most people. I don't know our demographics, so we're probably speaking to people.
Okay,
our age.
most likely, it is safe to assume that if you're watching this video, you remember 2006. But anyway, moving on. But most of the comedy of this portion, it comes from Ryan Reynolds just being Ryan Reynolds. Like, in that, even before Deadpool kind of way, he always had that way of delivering lines.
Yeah.
Like, they calls this family friend to try to get in touch with his wife, and she's kind of being a bitch to him for some reason, and he's just like...
She's probably because the way him and his wife's relationship seems to be is like very distant almost. You get a feeling that something happened there, and he took this job being a trucker that apparently she didn't even want him to do. And he does have a kid, which we just kind of hear over the phone, but yeah, he's talking. So I imagine this lady, she's probably like that girlfriend who's like, oh, she don't want you no more, kind of that girl.
Oh, I gotta run to the store real quick, even though you kind of sound a little panicked.
Yeah, he's literally begging this woman. He's like,
Yeah, this is when he's trying to get the number for the State Department. And he's like, I need you to look up the number to the State Department. She's like, well, I was about to run to the store. And he starts yelling at her, like, get the fucking number. And then
Don't yell at me.
yeah, she hangs up. And a few seconds later, he calls her back and is like,
he has
sorry,
a
I yelled at
tantrum
you.
first. He has a tantrum first, as he should. Like, he's acting like super like funny and pissed and like, but it's like I feel like we all would in this scenario. What else would you do? You'd be like, no one will listen to me because how can you explain it?
He just naturally has like a very comedic delivery. Even in a scene where he's enacting pure frustration, it's like so
have
funny.
either of you seen Blade Trinity?
No.
Okay, well, he's that same way in Blade Trinity, like from beginning to end, except it kind of lends more it's almost like Deadpool before Deadpool. It's just like in X-Men Wolverine, it's just like that same kind of Ryan Reynolds comedy.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's not the focal point of this movie, but all the funny points of this movie come from Ryan Reynolds, as do all of the points,
Just
really.
the frustration of these people being like not taking his situation seriously.
But there's a lot of like the minuscule things. He eventually gets on the phone with this because the U.S. doesn't negotiate with terrorists, and so he gets in contact through, I think, his company, this like basically hostage rescuing group. And they were like kind of guide him through. He needs to turn his cell phone on vibrate to save battery, and he needs to like look around for any markers on like the coffin maker and all this other stuff, and like that they believe that it's possible that the hostage people or the kidnappers, sorry, are using like a cloned line, which Ryan Reynolds, Paul, he reveals that he has the number to the kidnapper, and so he gives it to him. But there's this whole thing about like, you don't care about me, you care about your bottom dollar and like meeting your requirements and all this other jazz.
Yeah, because essentially they're not wanting him to go public, because I do believe at this point we know about the video that
Yeah, the kidnapper calls him during that phone call, actually, and is like, we want you to make a video. You have a note by your foot. Read it off, record on the phone, send it to us. And basically, the guy on the other end of the phone, like the negotiator, is like, don't do that. We don't want to involve anybody. We want to keep this contained. Of course you do. And also, with the note, there's a glow stick and a flashlight.
I think there's like 2 or 3 glow sticks.
Yeah, there's some glow sticks and a flashlight. And also, this is important for later, but during the phone call with the negotiator, he was like, you don't care about me and all this other stuff. And he's like, have you saved anyone? And he says, we saved Mark White. And he was like, apparently a student and he's back at home.
That's just one that he was willing to give him because he said, I can't give the names of people. And he's like, just give me any kind of hope. Just give me hope, essentially. And he said, we saved one kid, a kid named Mark White. And he said he'd be about 21 years old now, and he's back at home in school, probably thankful to be back in school.
Yeah, and those pins I mentioned earlier, he's been writing all this information on the inside of the coffin.
Yeah, phone numbers. When he first saw the number that called him that woke him up, or I guess he noticed the phone, he wrote that number down thinking it might have been help, but it was the the kidnapper, essentially. And at this point, Ryan, or Paul, he's talking to the hostage situation man, and he's like, you know, why would they take me? What did I do? And it becomes this internal conflict of, what would you do for your family, essentially? He's like, I wouldn't kill anybody. And he's like, are you so sure about that? Essentially, it's bringing up that whole, like, oh, are you truly better than them if you were in their shoes?
Yeah, basically, the guy's like, the kidnappers aren't terrorists, not really. You know, they're not associated with everything going on. They're just trying to make money.
Mm-hmm. They're just like low-life criminals, essentially.
People who might have been affected by the destruction and chaos happening in Iraq at the time.
Right. But essentially, we're waiting on the guy from the negotiation center to, like, find him. We're also dealing with pressure from the negotiator for him to contact the embassy that he's already been told no by. And he actually gets on the phone with him again, and he's like, you know, I don't have $5 million. And he was like, we'll take less. $1 million.
1 million money.
1 million money.
But basically, it results in them sending him a video after he refuses to make the video for him. And it's a video of this lady that he works with. Or it's a picture. It's a picture first. And basically with a gun to her head. And he's like, okay, I'll make the video. And so he makes the video and he sends it to him. And apparently it hits on YouTube and goes slightly viral.
Yeah, they were saying it already was at like 75,000 views.
Yeah. And of course he's getting like, why did you make the video, Paul?
Yeah, they were playing on the news too.
Yeah, they're playing it on the news. It's going viral in America, and when he gets back in contact with the negotiator, or the
Dan Brenner.
Yeah, Dan, he's getting on to him about making the video because now he's stirred up a hornet's nest, essentially. And
basically saying that now they have to keep their promise.
Yeah. And so I don't even think he mentions that he needs $1 million because he's like, that's probably not even gonna happen. But yeah, because I think Dan was like, we can't give money. If we could, it'd be done, but
sure.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't even work in the first place. But at this point, I think Dan just tells them to relax, and they're doing everything in their power. And this is when we start to get a little bit of like good character development with Paul. Like, you'd imagine a movie about a man in a box not being able to really dig that deep into somebody, but this movie does. You learn a lot about just him inside of this coffin. Like, for example, it's kind of cool, a movie from 2010 brings up anxiety issues. I suffer with bad anxiety, so that was kind of cool to see. Like, when he was about to get off the phone, he was like, you know, I have really bad anxiety. And he's like, do you have your medicine? For some reason, they gave him his medicine. So
it's probably he had it in his pocket.
Yeah, he just had it, and they're like, who cares? Just put it in there. But he took his anxiety medicine, though, with the flask that he was given.
With booze in it.
Yeah. And so at this point, he's taking his anxiety medicine. He's calming down and not letting the panic get to him. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie, we were all giddy and during this scene. I'm not even scared of snakes, but he wakes up feeling something in his pants.
And he wakes up moaning like,
Yeah. And we thought it was a rat at first, but you just see something moving slowly down his pants, and it crawls out, and it is a huge fucking snake. I don't know what kind of snake it is, but
I don't know if black mambas are native to that area.
Black mambas are white. They're white.
Black mambas are black,
They
dude.
have a black mouth. That's why they're called that.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It was probably.
Not want to stick around long enough to find out.
And
It's venomous.
they were saying like he should have stomped it, but I was thinking like inside of the coffin laying down, even though he was wearing like combat boots, I don't think you could. I feel like that would just piss it off and it would just move really fast.
I don't care. I'd still be stomping.
He still has a pretty smart plan, and it fails, but it works at the same time.
No, it works to get the snake out.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So this snake is balled up in the corner of the coffin, and it is so tense, like it goes dead silent. He's just like slowly moving, and he grabs his flask and undoes the cap, and the freaking cap hits the ground. You're just like, oh! Just the slightest noise, and the snake kind of hunches back to the sound. And what he does, he takes the alcohol from the flask and he just kind of splashes it just gently in front of and on the snake. And what he does is he builds like a little ring almost around the snake and sets it on fire. But at this point, everything starts going to shit because the snake's freaking out and he's freaking out. And the flask tips over and all the booze is heading straight for the fire. And then his glow stick is also busted. I think it just
melts.
Yeah, it just melts. And so it's starting to get dark. But the snake does get startled enough to leave the coffin. The snake leaves the coffin.
In this like hole.
Yeah, so it just burrowed its way in. And now he's stuck in there with the fire, but he is able to, and I think does the booze catch the fire yet?
Yeah, it like catches, and then he immediately takes the like dirt or sand or whatever and like snuffs it.
Yeah, we were all like, we would have been screwed. I would
never have thought of that in that panic
moment.
Yeah,
it was the heat of the moment.
It was literally the heat of the moment too.
So he starts just slinging dirt all over the fire, and it does get put out. And he's safe. that scene it's really good. It's really suspenseful.
And then like after that, you know, once he calms down, we have this really sad scene where he calls the nursing home where his mom is and talks to his mom who has like Alzheimer's or dementia. And well, we've talked in the past about Alzheimer's and dementia and how it kind of hits close to home here at the horror in.
I don't even relate to it really, but this scene made me just about tear up. It did make me tear up. I didn't cry, but I was getting there.
Basically, this is his call saying that this might be the last time I ever talk to you. And it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand.
He calls his mom, and she picks up, and she has no clue who he is. And she's like, me and your... I can't remember.
Me and your dad.
Yeah, it was... I feel like she called him something, but...
Me and your pa.
Me and your dad play gin rummy every night.
Yeah, she's saying that her and her dad are playing games and they're happy, and he's like, Mom, I don't think Pop's there no more, so I don't think that's... But he's just kind of going with it and just talking to her and asking her how she's been, and she's asking how he's doing, and he's like, I'm not doing the best, you know. I'm like, I'm in a bad spot, and this might be the last time I ever get to talk to you. And he asked her about some flowers that he sent her like 9 months ago or 6 months ago, something like that, and he was asking if she received them, and she, of course, he was just like, never mind. But he's basically saying, this is probably the last time I'm ever gonna talk to you. And he like just deeply says that he loves her. He's like, I love you, Mom, I love you so much. And she just goes back to repeating, me and your pop have been playing this game at the nursing home, and it hurts so bad because all he wanted to hear was "I love you too." He's like, "Can you just say it back?" But she's not comprehending it, and it's just it's so sad.
It's so sad.
It's a really good scene though, but okay. So at this point, I'm trying to think, where are we going from here?
At this point, he, one of, well, it's not revealed until just a little bit later, but he receives a video from the kidnapper, and it's of the coworker that he saw a picture of, and it's basically like a video saying that the people did not meet the requirements, and then she gets killed.
Yeah, and he is freaking out. Like, he is
he vomits.
Yeah, he pukes immediately and just starts punching shit, and he's about to take his own life. He's got a knife up to his throat, and he's just playing back just the smallest voices that he has heard on the phones just to try to keep him sane. Just like hearing his kid on the voicemail, like that was enough just to get him through.
And it was in this moment of silence that he hears the chanting of a mosque, like a PA system called a prayer. And it's like he has more of an idea of where he is, and he lets the negotiator know. And then shortly after this, while he's on the phone, we hear jets flying overhead and bombs hit. And we see like the coffin begins to bow underneath the pressure, and it cracks, and sand starts pouring in, and he like stuffs the hole to try to stop it. And essentially, like, now it's just a waiting game on if they're gonna find him in time. And he's on the phone with him, and it's like, is this the end? And he was the kind of guy, kind of like, he drops the facade, and he's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of over. And
yeah, but he's like still being hopeful at the same time. He's like, I know we mentioned it before, but once again, he's holding on hope to this person named Mark White. It's like he's looking at that name as like, there was somebody else in my shoes who got out of this alive, essentially. And
he thinks that his captors are dead.
Yeah, at this point, he thought the I can't think of what it's called, like a strafing run, whatever. I don't know, something like that.
There's a bombing, like a raid.
Yeah,
in the city.
And I'm trying to think what happens now.
Well, at this point, he's kind of like just waiting, and he gets a phone call from his captors, actually, and it reveals that they're still alive.
Yeah,
and he's like, they haven't sent anything yet. Send a video of you cutting your finger off. And
they will go after his family if he doesn't. Yeah,
they have his ID and stuff, and they like read back his address.
It's a pretty funny moment because this is a Ryan Reynolds moment for sure, but they're like reading off his address, city he lives, and stuff like that. He's like, "You don't know that. You don't know where I live. You're reading that off of a book." It's like, no, you didn't know that.
But at this point, he's kind of like lost all hope, but the threat of his family kind of is too much for him. Yeah. And he cuts his own finger off.
Yeah, he freaking... In that bag, we didn't mention earlier, there was also a pocket knife. That's how he almost...
Yeah.
did all that. But, so he freaking instantly... starts recording himself while this coffin is filling up with freaking sand. He just holds his pinky out. He's still wearing a ring finger. He's still wearing a ring on his finger. And he chops his pinky off, and you see it like dangle off. It's like, ew.
But basically in this like moment of high pressure where it's like they're on the way to get him, like they think they know where he is, he finally gets a phone call back from his wife that he's been trying to get this entire time, and she's basically like, they're gonna find me, I'm gonna be fine, they're right here, like I love you and all that. It's really heartfelt. Like, DMac was saying how it was like really screwing him up during it,
Yeah, Dan calls him, and you can hear the sound of a Jeep it's and he's just freaking, they're flooring it. He's like, we are going to be there in 3 minutes, and he's finally getting a call back from his wife, and he picks it up immediately. And we didn't mention who the lady was, but we didn't mention like the insurance people.
Yeah, he gets a phone call from his company, and it's It's basically this HR guy, and he's calling to let him know, like, do a survey of like, hey, this has been recorded.
Yeah, he starts the phone call, and he's like, yeah, they're coming to get you real soon. That's awesome, man. But he's like, we wanted you to know this phone call is gonna be recorded. And he's like, well, who cares? I'm freaking buried in a coffin. Get me out of here.
And they basically tell him that they are terminating his employment as of this morning. And so since this incident happened after he was terminated, it just, like, all of his benefits are gone. So if he dies...
And the reason he was fired, though, was he was apparently having an affair with this lady who he was working with.
That got shot.
Yeah.
In the video.
That's who it was in the video. That's why it was such a big... like,
so basically the company he worked for just said, yeah, screw you.
Yeah, we're gonna fire you right after that, so you're not getting any of that money. Sorry.
I feel like the company implied he had an affair just...
Yeah, we never get definitive proof.
Yeah, so because Paul states multiple times, like, we're just friends, like, you don't understand. But I think the company just kind of shoehorned that.
They were like, yeah,
for an excuse to fire him because they knew of his situation, and they probably did it to both of them. Really.
Yeah, probably. After, like, at the end of the phone call, we hear like movement above, and he's like, they're here, and he has to hang up on his wife. And we get this like really like high stakes moment where the sand is almost like full. We hear
we forgot the dream too.
It's okay. He has a dream that he's saved, but it's a fake out. And
yeah, he's just imagining, like, they find him, and he's like, you just see the sunlight, and he's just smiling, and it just cuts back to pure darkness of him just
laying right there. After he gets terminated.
Yeah.
He's just laying there with his finger cut off. Like, and then nope.
But back to where we were, the coffin's filling with sand. We hear the negotiators like, we see the coffin, and they're digging it up, and then you hear, oh no. And he's like, what? And he's like, it's Mark White. We found Mark White.
And it pretty much just ends on Ryan Reynolds screaming and being buried, as the movie implies.
And that's buried.
And we do get a credit scene. It's like a 2-second credit scene, maybe, of a coffin that looks fresh, and it has Mark White written on it, implying... What I think it's implying is that there's someone else buried, and Dan told them that they saved Mark White. They found him. He was dead. They didn't find Paul, though, so...
But it also could just be a reference to the fact that, like, the person that they claimed that they saved, that was the beacon of hope of Ryan Reynolds' character, Paul, the entire story was dead the entire time.
Yep.
Like, it was all built on lies, just like Ryan has been saying since the beginning.
Yep.
But anyway, guys, that's buried. So
it's an incredible movie. Oh my god.
It's up there. I'd say it's probably in the top 5 most suspenseful movies I've ever watched.
So I saw this a few years ago, but man, watching this second time, it got a flashback of just how good it is, and I feel like nobody talks about this movie. Like, it's a very hidden gem.
Well, until Zombie Cat pointed it out to me, I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's one of the best suspense movies. Like, the whole movie, I was like, God, I can't breathe, man. Like I was mentioning earlier, I got anxiety issues too, and I was like, the whole movie, I felt like I was locked in a box. I was like, just like the credits roll.
I will say, this movie did a great job of capturing the atmosphere of, like, feeling like you're in there with him the entire time.
It's so claustrophobic.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, let's get into our scoring of Buried. So, like always, we're going to start with story. I felt like the story was unique. I have seen very few things that are similar to this
I've
concept.
never seen anything like this.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I've seen like one room concept like Saw, but this is on a much smaller scale.
Yeah, much smaller. And you leave that room in Saw, you see the outside.
So for story, I think I'm gonna give it a solid 8.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm also gonna give it an 8 because it's just so unique but simple. It's sometimes something so simple like this, just playing off of a lot of people's biggest fear ever, and being buried alive. Like, oh my god. Even if that's not your biggest fear, it's gonna be up there after watching this movie. Because,
it seems like a horrible experience.
Like when I have my anxiety attacks, I feel like that's what it's like. I'm in a freaking box. I'm like, God.
So I gave it an 8. You gave it an 8. That gives us an average of 8 for story. Pretty good. Pretty good start. Moving on to characters. Now this one's kind of weird because I feel like we only really get to flesh out one character.
So yeah, he is our characters, and
but I mean there are other characters.
Yeah.
What do you think?
For me, I'm going to give, being that it's Ryan Reynolds being in such a serious performance, I'm going to give Paul a freaking 9 because he's just, it's amazing how you learn so much about a character who's literally just trapped inside of a box, and somehow they worked in a 1 hour and 30-minute movie of like learning the sad backstory, him calling his mom, and just that heartfelt scene, and knowing this is going on with his family, and talking to his wife at the end. We cared that much that we were on the verge of tears for this character finally getting out of this box just to be slapped in the face before death.
Ryan Reynolds absolutely crushed in this movie.
And he's really and I liked Dan being that kind of like, we're looking for you, I promise, but we're not going crazy looking for you.
I think for me personally, I'm gonna have to give this movie an 8. Not because I don't think it deserves a 9, but because I feel like for me, if the movie was a little bit longer, but then again, I've been saying the whole time we were watching, it's like, how is this going to be an hour and a half long?
I think they stretched it
to the max. I know. I just kind of wish that we would have gotten a little bit more answers. Like, did he really cheat? And all this other stuff. Those are some things that I really wanted to know, and I feel like would have really showed us more of his character. And so for that reason, I'm giving it an 8. But with my 8, you gave a 9, so that's 8.5 for character, which is still good.
Fucking phenomenal performance.
Now, moving on to antagonist, this is kind of... I feel like the antagonist is obviously the kidnappers, and I feel like this trope is kind of overdone.
Well, I honestly see the antagonist more as being buried alive. If we're counting in the thought of being trapped in this box as an antagonist. The box
is man versus nature. The box is, kind of Ryan is man versus self. And then also all the people he's trying to contact versus man with the, and with the true antagonist. And then man versus society with all the people that he's trying to get to help him. Then I feel like for me, I'm going to give it a solid 7.
Yeah, I was thinking a 7 too, because all the characters, even though like you can just imagine in your head the people that he's talking to, like it's weird. You feel like you can just see them when he's talking to them.
I feel like people have these conversations on a daily where it's like, please hold.
Yeah. And it's like they all just perform so well, voice acting and like that, just nobody's listening to me essentially, and it just works together. His captors sound evil and they obviously mean business, and just the world shutting him down, it sucks, but in a good way. I'll give it a 7.
Okay, so that gives us a 7 for antagonist. Moving on to humor. This is not an inherently funny movie, but Ryan Reynolds
it's pretty
makes
funny,
it funny.
Though.
For the Ryan Reynolds isms that are in this movie, I'm going to give it a solid 2.
For me, I thought this movie was pretty fucking hilarious at times. I'm gonna give it like a 6 because this movie made me laugh out loud a few times. Just like the pure, what we were just talking about, straight frustration of people being like, what are you talking about? let me just transfer you over. He's like, quit transferring me. I'm in a fucking box.
I definitely don't think 5 is unreasonable. It was pretty funny, and Ryan made it. All of the humor that was in it was so.
Yeah, the tantrums were so good. it was so good. So this movie genuinely made me laugh out loud, but in a good way. It's like it's a frustrating way. It's like, I know it's not funny, but it's funny just out of the frustration.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what this average is, but I gave it a 2, you gave it a 6. So no judgment, I'm bad at math. Here you go. So moving on to scariness. Now, okay, this one's hard for me to rate because when I think of scary, I think crap my pants scary, and not suspense scary.
Well, to me,
this is suspense scary.
Yeah, for me, if I'm giving this a 9. This movie, I genuinely, from start to finish, felt like I was inside of this box with Ryan Reynolds, and it's like, it's horrifying. Every second you're like, please just cut to the surface for 1 second and give my anxiety any kind of relief from this freaking casket. It's like the whole movie is just like, just the moment, even in his hallucination of just getting out, it's like light. And then it cuts back to reality if he's just in this dark abandoned box. And not many movies can make me feel as breathless as this one did. It had me on edge again, knowing how it was going to end.
So for me, if atmosphere was its own category in our scoring, it would be much higher. But for me, scariness, I'm giving it a 6. I was uncomfortable by the suspense, but I have seen another movie that we will cover in the future that I feel did that kind of suspense better for me personally, and actually has me on the edge of my seat. While in this one, I don't feel as claustrophobic as Zombie Cat here did, and so I'm giving it a 6 for scariness. So I gave it a 6, and you gave it a 9. Moving on to the last category, like always, we have experience. How we felt about the movie as a whole.
This is pretty easy for me. I'm gonna give it a freaking badass 8. This movie is kick-ass. It's so good. It's a hidden gem. Just go watch it. It's amazing. You would never imagine a movie like this existing until you find out it does, and then you figure out it's good, and it's like, it's really fucking good.
I agree with you. I'm also going to give it an 8. While I wasn't as captivated by the suspense and the humor as our editor, or not editor, but our audio guy and DMac and Zombie Cat here were. But I definitely think that it's still worth watching. It's still worth buying. I think it's up there in terms of good movies. It's just, for me, I'm a stickler when it comes to being scared, and I didn't find it as funny as the rest of everybody did. So for that reason, I'm also giving it an 8. So that gives us a total of 8. I think that's a pretty good score across the board. I'm not gonna lie.
It's a great movie.
But I think that this is interesting because this is the most divisive scores we've had on opposite ends of a spectrum before.
Yeah, for suspense horror, this is in my top. I don't know of top what, but it's in my top for sure. It's one of the best suspense horror movies I've seen. It's so good.
It gives very reminiscent vibes of a more confined version of Hatchet, that book that we had to read in elementary school where that kid gets trapped on that island after a plane crashed. So yeah, it gives very similar vibes to that, the survival aspect, but more involvement of the outside world. But it was a good movie. All right, guys, that is Buried, and that is our scoring. So just some last minute things. We do have an Instagram, so if you want to keep up to date on all of our real world shenanigans, please head over to @thehorrornin channel there. We are making new posts, so please go follow and just keep up to date with us. We also have a Patreon.
Yeah, you can follow us on the Horror Den on Patreon, and you can subscribe for as low as $5 a month to have your name put at the end of all of our videos.
Like these wonderful people.
And all profits go straight back into the channel. We're like 1 month away from finally affording a capture card.
Which we have a series that I'm so excited for.
It's going to be fun, though. We're super excited about that. And, yeah, just all support will go right back into the channel, and we'll have more fun things in the future.
Yeah, and when we do finally get that capture card, we plan on making a Twitch and streaming on Twitch and on YouTube. So just keep your eyes open, and we'll be adding a Twitch hopefully in the near future. But in the meantime, a special shout out thanks to our editor SmiteLad for all his hard work and dedication to the channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you've made it this far, if you like what we're doing here, please give us a like
and subscribe.
And subscribe if you like what we're doing. Leave a comment down below on what you think of this movie, or give us some more recommendations on suspense movies like leading forward in the future. But with all that keeping in mind, we hope you're doing good. We hope everything's great. Hope you're having a new good 2025. But more importantly than anything else, stay spooky out there.